Okay, so welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This morning we're going to look at chapter 3 of PHP 7. Particularly, I'm going to be teaching you about PHP Constants. We're also going to be looking at PHP arrays. We're also going to look at PHP. We're also going to look at PHP conditional statements and PHP loops. So let's begin with PHP constants. So a constant is actually a variable. The only difference is that it cannot be changed or undefined. So it's called a variable. It's called a variable because it can vary. It can vary. That's why it's called a variable. It can vary. What does that mean exactly? It means that let me just do that example here. It means that if you have a variable like age, like that, and you assign it 20, like that, you can echo age and it will output 20. On the other hand, on the lower lines, you can change that value to something else. You can assign age to 30. And if you echo age, then the output is going to be 30. So that's why it's called a variable, because it can vary, it can change. Otherwise, a constant, please remember these two things about constants. A constant cannot be changed, number one, and it cannot be undefined. What does that mean? For a variable, you can create a variable like this, age, just like that. And you don't assign a value on it, but you cannot do that for a constant. So the other thing to note is that unlike variables, constants are automatically global variables. So they have a global scope. They can be accessed from anywhere anywhere in your code or in your page. Now, to create a constant, you use the define function in PHP. So let's see how that is done. Now, this is the define function. The define function has the parameter name, the parameter value, and another parameter which is a Boolean value, which is case insensitive. So the first one, of course, is the identifier, the name of the constant. The second one here is the value you want to assign it. And the last one here is to specify whether the identifier, the name of the constant, should be case insensitive or not. By default, the value there is false, meaning that the constant variable name will be case sensitive. So when you change this value here from false to true, then it's going to be case insensitive. So it's a bit confusing. I urge you to read more about it, but generally just know that by default the value here is false, meaning that the constant name is case sensitive. If you want it to be case insensitive, then you change this value to true. You change that value there to true. So let's see an example in code. So if you want to define a constant called greeting, then you go ahead and use the define function. So the first thing you provide it is the name of the constant. Then you assign it a value. So we're just assigning it a value. And therefore, if we come down here and do echo, then the name of the constant, then it's going to output the value of the constant. So that value cannot change throughout the execution of the program. So that's how a constant really is. Now, if we want our constant to be case sensitive, then we provide the third parameter and we give it a value of true. So now this what did I say? Okay. I'm also a bit confused here. Okay, I think what the correct thing to say is when you give it the value of true, and that's why I said you have to read more about this. When you give it a value of true, then it becomes case insensitive. Case insensitive, meaning that even though you defined it here with all caps, now we are able to echo using lowercase, and it's still going to give us the output. So please try this during your practical just to see whether it works. Okay, let's see the next one here. Oh, we didn't have another one. Okay, I thought there was another example for this one. Please, I urge you, and I'll set this on the quiz. I urge you to find time and practice this one so that you understand when you provide the third parameter on the defined function, either true or false, what happens? Does the constant name become case sensitive or case insensitive? So I'll ask that in the quiz rather. So make sure you understand that. Okay, so you can also define a constant array using the define function. So this is how you do it. So again, you begin by giving the name of the array, then you do an opening curly bracket and a closing square bracket, not curly bracket, I'm sorry. That's called a square bracket. So you do an opening square bracket and a closing square bracket. Then you go ahead and give the values separated by a comma. So here we're just giving strings. And the last value will not have a comma. So that's how you create a constant array. So if, for example, you do echo and you do cars 0, then it's going to print this first value that is on position number 0 of the array. So the output is going to be Alfa Romeo. Okay. Now, as I mentioned earlier, constants are global when it comes to scope, meaning you can access it from anywhere in your program. So in this example, we're just creating a constant called greeting. Then you can see here that we are echoing greeting inside a function. And if we call that function, then we are going to get this as the output. So it's going to be executed successfully. Why? Because constants are global variables. So they're not local variables. So they can be accessed from even inside a function. So that is it about constants. We now move on to the next concept in today's lesson, which is the concept of operators. So just like any other programming languages that you've already done, like C and C++, in PHP, we have these operators. So we have arithmetic operators, we have assignment operators, we have comparison operators, we have increment and decrement operators, we have logical operators, we also have string operators, array operators, and lastly, we have conditional assignment operators. So we're just going to look very fast at examples of this because they are not any different. They are not any different from operators that you've learned in other languages. Now, just to mention, operators, I used to perform operations on variables and their values. So for example, For example, you can use an arithmetic operator. We can have, I'm just trying to, let me reduce that. We can have, for example, we can have something like current balance is equals to maybe 1000, like that. Then you can have withdraw amount. So whatever they are withdrawing, maybe it's 500, like that. And therefore you can do something like current balance is equals to current balance, let me just call it bal, minus, because of lack of space there, minus the withdraw amount. I hope you get it. Withdraw amount, like that. So what we're calling an operator, for example, in this particular one is this one here. So this minus is an operator. So it's performing a mathematical operation on these two variables, and that is why it's called an arithmetic operator, the minus. So this is just an example of how we can use an operator in PHP to perform some operations on variables. Okay, so now we want to look at this arithmetic operators. So these are the common mathematical operators like addition, subtraction, multiplication. This one is called division. So this is how we do division in PHP and in many other programming languages. And this one is called modulus, what we've been calling remainder. When you want to find the remainder after dividing, for example, 2 by 5, so it's 5 divided by 2 is going to be 2 remainder 1. So if you use modulus, then you're going to get the answer 1. It gives the remainder after division. And you have this one, exponentiation. Exponentiation, that one. So read more about it when you have time. Okay, now let's go ahead and look at assignment operators. Now it's called assignment because it's used to assign a value to a variable. So that's why it's called assignment, an assignment operator. Now we have several. So let me just give first an example. So like here, we can have age, a variable age is equals to 20, like that. So this is the assignment operator, this one. Assignment operator. So that's an assignment operator. So it's the first one we are seeing here. This one. It's called the assignment operator. So in this one, the left operand. Okay. This is another term, by the way, operand. So whenever you use any operator, on variables, then the variables are referred to as the operands. So x here is an operand and y is an operand. So the left operand gets set to the value of the expression on the right. So the left, of course, is x. So it's gonna get the value that is on the right, which is y. Just the same way here. This is our left operand. So it's gonna be assigned the value of whatever is on the right, whether it's an expression or just the value itself. Okay, then we have the addition assignment operator, which can be done like this. So this is similar to this. So when you do x plus is equals to y, is the same as writing x is equals to x plus y. Similarly, you can do this for all the others, for all the other arithmetic operators. So if you get a code like that one, if you get a code like that one, please always remember that it simply means that. So most of the time, for example, we use this technique to update variables, for example, in a loop. So of course there's another technique, but we can use something like, so we have a variable x, so we can do x plus is equals to 1, like that, or x plus is equals to 2 if we want to update 2 during every loop. For example, you want to print the even numbers, so that is the same as that is equals to x plus 2, like that. So I hope you understand those assignment operators. Okay, now the next one are called comparison operators. So they're called comparison operators because they compare the whatever is provided on the left to what is provided on the left, on the right. So the left versus the right operand. So it compares them in order to give a Boolean results. So this one results to a Boolean results. So for example, when we use the two equal signs, then that is what we call the equal comparison operator. Equal comparison operator. For example, this one, when we do x equals so 2, remember it's 2, y, then it's going to return true if the value of x and the value of y is the same. Otherwise, it's going to return false. So please remember that comparison operators, all of them, either return a true or a false after comparing the value on the right and the left. Now, other than equal, another one that is almost similar to equal is the identical. So I want to give you this again as a reading assignment. Can you try and find out the difference between equal and identical? Or of course, one of them you can just see that equal uses 2 equal signs, while identical uses 3 equal signs. So I'm giving you this as a reading assignment. Find out the difference between them and when to use each one of them. So when do you use equal? When do you use identical? Okay, then the opposite of equal is not equal. So that is what we're having here. So not equal, again, will return a true if they are not equal and a false if they are equal. Then you can also use this one for not equal in PHP, this one, and this one for not identical. Then of course we have greater than, less than, greater than or equal to. So they do as the name suggests actually. Then we have another one here. This one is called the spaceship comparison operator. So this one, it returns an integer less than or equal to or greater than 0, depending on if x is less than, equal to, or greater than y. So this is one of the operators that was introduced in PHP 7. So again, it might take some time for you to understand that, but give yourself time and have a look at it once more and you'll be able to get it right. Then we have the famous increment and decrement operators. Now this one will, these ones, they increment or decrement the variable value by one. So they're normally used to update the variable value in loops most of the time. So that is what we call. Now you can, if you put the plus plus before the variable name, it's called pre-increment, meaning you're incrementing it. You're incrementing it before you increment by 1, then you return the value of x. You increment by 1, then you return the value of x. Otherwise, when you put it after and then it's post, that means return the value of x, then increment by 1. So that is the main difference between pre and post, increment or decrement. It's just the return. Do you return the value first before you add, or you add first before you return the value? Okay. Then we have the logical operators. The logical operators, you know the truth table. So the logical operators really is what you learn in the truth table. So if it's and, for example, a true and a true will give you true. Anything else will give you false. For or, it's the other way around. A false or a false will give you false. Any other thing will give you a true. And of course we have XOR or exclusive OR. And in PHP, other than writing their name, you can also use this for and, you can use this for or, and you can use the exclamation mark for not. So for example, when you say not x, if the value of x is true, then it's gonna negate that and give you false if you echo the variable x after that. Okay, then we have string operators. String operators are mostly used to join strings together. So for example, we have the dot operator, which is used to join two strings, to concatenate. So if you have some text1 here and text2, and you do text1 dot text2, then it's going to join them together. So for example, if you're having txt1 is equals to, for example, January, like that, and you have txt2 is equals to Feb, for example, then if you do echo txt1 dot txt2, then the output is gonna be Jan Feb, like that. So we're going to join them together like this. So that's what the dot operator is used for. Then we have, this is also very important, it's called the concatenation assignment operator. So it's used to append text2 to text1, and you'll find it very useful when creating your applications. Just trying to find an example. Trying to find an example of a real scenario. I've actually used it severally on different projects. Okay, I'm unable to find one, but let me do this. For example, shouldn't be a good example. Okay, for example, you have first name is equals to John, like that, Then you have surname is equals to do, like that. So you can easily append, that is join the two names by doing fname is equals to, like that. Let's say this is not a very good example. See, if you do something like that, and now you echo, first name, then the output is going to be John Doe, like that. The output is going to be John Doe, like that. So that's how you for example, use the concatenation assignment. So it's just going to append. Okay, so let's move on to array operators. So we have the union operator. So for example, if you use x plus y on an array, then it's gonna join all the values of the array x and array y. Then we have the equality operator and the identity operator. So just compare if the values, remember an array has key and value pairs. So it's going to compare if they're the same in both arrays. And of course, not equal, inequality, and not identity also perform the same thing on arrays. So those are called array operators. And lastly, on operators, we have the conditional assignment operators. So the first one is called the ternary operator, and the next one is called the non-coalescing operator. Okay, so let's begin with this one, the ternary. So you have a variable. This variable will receive some value. Now, that value it will receive is either going to be this value or this value. Now, how it is determined whether it's going to get this value or this value is by evaluating this expression. Now, if this expression is true, then the first value is given. Otherwise, if it's false, then the second value is given. Okay, so let's try and do an example for that, for the ternary operator. So for example, you can have you can have a variable under age, then you can now use the ternary operator to check if the age is less than 18. So if it's less than 18 question mark, we want to return if it's true, then we want to say you are not allowed. You're not allowed to create an account. Not allowed. I don't have much space, so if this guy is less than 18, we just want to say not allowed. Otherwise, so it has that full colon. Otherwise, you want to say welcome, something like that. Like that. So the value that will be saved here will depend on the value of the age variable. So if for example, age is equals to 15, then if we echo here, if down here we echo, if we echo and age, then the output the output is going to be 15. So it's gonna evaluate this. 15 is less than 18. So it's gonna turn to true, and therefore the output here is going to be not allowed, like that. Not allowed. So that's going to be the output. So I hope you understand how to use the ternary operator. Now for this one, to be honest with you, I have not gone through it, and I want to give you that as a reading assignment. So please find out how the null coalescing conditional assignment operator works, and understand it, because most likely I'm going to ask it again on the quiz. Okay, then that is how we get done with operators in PHP. And now we are on conditional statements. So in PHP, we have the following conditional statements: if else, multiple if else, and the switch statement. So let's go ahead and have a look at a single if statement. So in this example, we declare a variable t that takes the current time in 24-hour system. So in PHP, we have a function called date. If you give it the parameter capital H, then it gives you the current time in 24 hours. So for example, right now is 11:17. So right now it's gonna give 11. If you give it just H, it's gonna give 11. So the value of t is gonna be 11. So that's how that function works, the date function. You can read more about it on W3 School. Okay, and this is one of the functions that you'll use most of the time again in your projects. Okay, then we have the if statement. So this is how you write if, just like in C and C++. So you start with if, then some brackets, and the bracket really hosts the condition. It has to be a Boolean condition, meaning it has to evaluate to a true or false. So you must use a conditional operator. So here we are using the less than. So we're just saying if t is less than 20, then do this, echo, have a good day. So again, when it comes to writing the if statement, if it only has a single line of code, you can actually leave out the curly brackets. You don't have to do the curly brackets, you can leave them out. But if you're having more than one statement after it that needs to be executed, then you must include the curly bracket. So what that means is that this particular code can actually be written also as t less than 20, like that, and then enter. And then it's always good to indent. So echo, have a good day, just like that. So you can actually write this if statement like that, if it just has one statement inside it. Okay, so that's how we write the if statement. The next one is if else. So if else gives another option. So you see, if it's less than 20, if t is less than 20, we want to echo have a good day. But what if it's greater than 20? Then we want to print have a good night. So that's how we do the else. So we write if, then the condition, then an opening curly bracket, a closing curly bracket, then else, and an opening curly bracket, then the statement we want to execute, then a closing curly bracket. So with if else, you have something to give when the condition is true. You also have something to give when the condition is false. So that's what if else is. Then we have multiple if else. Now multiple if else is written using the else if statement. Now after the else if, you also provide a condition. Now with multiple else if, it must end with an else. The default, this is the default value, because look here, the first if gives a condition. If t is less than 10, then print out have a good morning. Now else if t is less than 20, have a good day. Else, so else have a good night. That is if t is greater than 20, because it's not taken care of. It's not taken care of in these conditions, in the first condition, in the second condition. So multiple if else, one of the advantages is that it gives you several options, but it also gives you a default value in case none of the options is actually achieved. And actually multiple if else is very similar to the switch statement. Very similar to the switch statement. Okay. And now we go to the switch statements. So the switch statement is used to select one of many blocks to be executed. Many blocks of code to be executed. So this is how it looks like. So normally, let me see, not very nice. Okay, so maybe we can begin here before we look at that. So normally, a switch statement will have a single expression. Now that expression is going to be matched. Is going to be matched in each case. I'm going to tell you what a case is. Then if there is a match with a case, then some block of code is going to be executed. At the end of that block of code, we have a break statement that is going to prevent the code from executing the other lines of code in the switch. So the break statement is used to exit the switch, simply put, by the way. Simply used to, when the break statement is arrived at, then the switch is exited. Then lastly, the switch has a default statement. So there's some expression, we have cases. Under the case, we have some block of code. After the block of code, in each case, we have a break statement. And at the end of the switch, we normally have a default statement, which ensures that if no case matches, then this default is executed. So that is what we are having here. That is what we're having here. So this is the expression. Now this is the case. So the case will have some value. If this value matches whatever is in this expression, then this code is going to be executed. After that code is executed, then the break statement is going to be executed. If the break statement is reached, then the flow of program execution is going to be transferred to below this closing curly bracket. So these others are not going to be executed. I hope you get the point. Okay, now similarly, if this case is matched, this code will be executed. After it's executed, the break will be executed. Now, if none of the cases matches, then the default case, it's called the default case, is going to be executed. So the code after default is going to be executed. Now, one thing you note here is that after every case, we have a break. But for the default, we do not have a break, because after all, after this code is executed, then we get out of the switch. So that's why the default does not need a break. Okay, so this is the example. So for example, here we're declaring a variable called favorite color and assigning it a value red. Now we write the keyword switch, then we pass it the expression or the variable favorite color. Now case, then we give it some value. So if this matches, in this case, this is going to match. So if this matches, then this is going to be executed. Then after that, the break is going to be executed. So these are the only two lines that are going to be executed in the switch, this one and this one. Then we are out of the switch because this case has already matched. Otherwise, this example should have, for explanation purposes, this example should actually be the last one, just before the default, so that we go through this one, we say this one won't be, this code won't be executed because it doesn't match. This one doesn't match, like that. Please remember that if all the cases do not match, we always have a default that will give some information to the user. The default case does not have a break because after it's executed, then you're at the end of the switch. So you're safe, you don't need the break. Okay. So this is an exercise. This is an exercise on the switch statement. I don't love homeworks, but I love giving homework. So this is your homework. So please make sure that you give this. Make sure that you do this when you have time. Okay, so just give me a moment to pick up a call, and then we will continue. Okay, so now we look at loops. Okay, so loops are used when you want to execute the same block of code over and over again. This can also be done by writing the same line of code over and over again, which is not efficient. So instead of doing that, we have loops. We have three types of loops in PHP. We have while, we have do while. Actually, there are four. We have for loop, and we have for each loop. So I just want to see how each one of them works in order to understand what loops are. Now, generally, the first three types of loops will have these three things. The first one is called the initialization. This one here. Initialization. So initialization is just the initial value. Now the next one that it's gonna have is this one here, and this is called the condition. And lastly, it's gonna have this guy here. This one is called the updates. So in this example, we look at the while loop. So this is how you write the while loop. While, so that's the keyword. Then you use an opening bracket and a closing bracket. Inside it, you provide a condition that is going to evaluate to either a true or a false. Then you have an opening curly bracket and a closing curly bracket for the while loop. Then you give the line of code that are going to be executed. And lastly, you provide an update. So why do we have initialization, condition, and update? Without providing this, then your while loop is going to execute forever. So the initialization gives the starting point. So here we want x to begin at 1, at value number 1. Now look, the condition we are checking is x less than or equal to 5. So if that is true, then we execute whatever is inside the loop. So that's how we are going to print this in the first loop, because it's true. And the value of x is 1, so it's going to print that. Then we come to the update here. So in the update, we add a 1 to the value of x, and it's already 1, so now it's 2. So in the second round, it's going to check, is 2 less than or equal to 5? True. So if it's true, then it's that line is going to be executed again. And that is how that is going to be printed. And so on and so forth. When it gets to 5, it's going to come here and check, is 5 less than or equal to 5? True. So that's how 5 is going to be printed. Then it's going to be updated to 6. Then it's going to check, is 6 less than or equal to 5? Then it's going to evaluate to false. Now when it evaluates to false, then the line after, it's not going to loop again. It's not going to check the condition again. So it's the line after the closing bracket of the while loop that is now going to be executed next. In this case, it's the closing PHP tag. So that's how the while loop is written, and that's how it's processed. Then you have do while. The only difference between do while and while is that with do while, there's a block of code that is going to be executed at least once before we check any condition. That line is going to be executed at least once. So again, here we still have the initialization, we still have the update, and we still have the condition. Now, how we do the do while is we write the do keyword, then an opening curly bracket and a closing curly bracket. Then we do the while and the condition. Then the semicolon comes here. So it has a semicolon, very important. Many people forget this when writing the do while syntax. Okay, so what happens here is that do this. So it's gonna echo the number is, so this is what is going to print out this first statement here. Then it's going to update X. Then it's going to check the condition. Is 2 less than or equal to 5? True. Then it's going to do again. So that's how this is going to be printed. And that one, and lastly that one. Because the condition is less than or equal to 5. So that's how we do the do while loop. So you use it when you want it to execute a block of code at least once before checking the condition. Then you have the for loop. So the for loop has the initialization, the condition, and the increment defined in this bracket, and they are separated by semicolons. Then we have an opening bracket and a closing bracket. Then the codes to be executed. So let's look at an example. This particular code has the initialization X set to 0. You don't have to declare this variable. You're not required to have declared this variable prior to using it in the loop, unlike the while and do while. So you can just declare and assign it here like we've done it. So you don't need to declare X up here. That's what I'm saying, before the loop. Nope. Then we have the condition. X is less than or equal to 10. And then we have X plus plus. So this is going to print 0 to 10. So it's easy, the for loop. And lastly, on loops, we have the for each. For each. That H. For each. Well, the for each loop. Now, this loop is a special one because it only works on arrays. Now, it is used to loop through the key and value pair in an array. The key and value pair in an array. It's very easy to write it. For each, then the array, then as. So you want to save the value of the array in some variable. So that variable, you're calling it value on each loop. So then, for example, you say echo value. So it's gonna begin from index 0 of the array and print the value. Then index 1, then index 2, then index 3, and so on and so forth. So that's how we do that. So this is an example. So here we're creating an array called colors. So this is how we create an array. You just create a variable and then you equate it to this array function. Then you give it values separated by commas, comma. So this array has 1, 2, 3, 4 values. So the size of this array is 4. Okay, so we do for each colors as, then we declare some variable. Then we simply echo that variable. So for each is going to know how many values are in the array, and therefore it's only going to loop the number of times that is required. That is depending on the size of the array. So for example here, it's only going to loop 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the output of that particular code is going to be this. Now for each is very important, especially when printing values from the database, because most of the time when you retrieve multiple values from your table in the database, then you're given back those values in an array, and therefore normally we use the for each to access those values, to loop through those values as we print them, for example in a table. So that's one of the practical applications of the for each loop. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to the end of chapter number 3. As a recap, we have been able to look at PHP constants. We also looked at PHP constant array, and we've been able to look at PHP operators, and we also looked at conditional statements, and lastly we've looked at the PHP loops. So in case you have a question, this is the time when you do it, or you can actually put the question on the comment below and I'll try to respond to it. Otherwise, asanteni sana.